Hello and welcome to the June 16th, 2020 Select Board meeting. Before we get started, I need to read the things for the remote meeting. So as a preliminary matter, this Select Board meeting, this is a Select Board meeting. I'm the chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Ed Prisby.
Here.
Doreen DeFazio.
Doreen DeFazio here.
Donna Stock.
Donna Stock here.
Peter Carlson.
Peter Carlson here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tim McInerney.
McInerney here.
Becca Meekins.
Here.
Jay Cummings.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Barbara Connolly.
Here.
Jennifer Connolly.
Jennifer Connolly here.
Amy Marr.
Amy Marr here.
Laura Often.
Laura Upton here.
I'm sorry, I'm just scanning my screen, I don't want to miss anybody. So as of right now, I don't see Dan, Heather, or Melissa, but if they join, we can recognize them as they come. Oh, Laura?
I'm not sure about Heather and Melissa. Dan should be here, but they're iffy. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you will find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so as long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. For this meeting, we are using Zoom as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join in. Excuse me. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, question, or motions. Please hold off till your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait, pardon me, until I yield the floor to you. If members wish to engage with other members, please do so through the chair. And each vote will be conducted by roll call vote. All right, announcements. I know Tim will talk about this more during the coronavirus update, but the town's phasing into reopening has been going well. Please continue to be cautious, wear a mask, and social distance. Starting June 29th, Town Hall will be open to the public by appointment only. Town Hall will be closed Friday, July 3rd for the holiday weekend. Town meeting is on this Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. on the high school athletic field and in the gymnasium. Registration will start at 7:30 a.m. Please wear a mask. Also, if it rains on Saturday, town meeting will be held on Sunday, June 21st. I'm sorry. Town election is Tuesday, June 23rd. Polls will be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Excuse me. Additionally, we received the monthly aggregate energy report and have saved over $2.7 million for the residences and businesses who participate in this program. I do just see that Dan Gale has joined us. So Dan, I'll take attendance from you too. If you can just reply that you're here.
Dan Gale, I'm here.
Thank you. All right. There are no public comments today, so we'll go to coronavirus update.
Madam Chair, Board, I only have 3 or 4 things to go over. Today, we had no new cases reported for coronavirus. Tomorrow morning, the Health Alliance for Worcester is meeting via Zoom to kind of get an assessment of where we stand as a district. So I'll report back after that meeting. I think the city manager in Worcester is going to a weekly as opposed to a daily press conference, stepping down his reporting requirements. On the 15th, Governor Baker announced a 2-day pop-up testing initiative for anyone who's attended large gatherings in the past 2 weeks. So there's 50 sites across the state, and they can be found on the mass.gov website. The dates are June 17 and 18. And obviously it's free testing and it's confidential, and they encourage people to get tested. So those locations are on the state website. And if people have been out and may have been around other people that might be infected, they should get tested. And that's what the governor's trying to get the word out about. So I'm relaying that message, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Tim? All right, we'll go to our first pay as you throw bags policy for low income seniors. Barbara Conley.
So I'm asking the board to approve some recommended changes to the pay-as-you-throw subsidized bag policy. The policy actually was approved by the board back in, I believe, 2010. And I believe, Doreen, you had something to do with that. At the time, that we were following the low income assistance qualifications that were provided by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. And that was a maximum household income of $35,000. So the maximum income couldn't exceed 60% of the estimated state median income at that time. So if you look at the fiscal 2020 60% state median figure, is $37,360. So what I'm proposing is that we change the pay-as-you-go subsidized bag policy to mirror the tax work policy, where we follow the HUD guidelines. So basically, the problem we're having now is people apply for the tax work-off program, but then they don't qualify for the bag program. So we'd like to have those figures exactly the same and follow the same date for renewal, which would be November 1st. And the clients can pick up the bags once a month. It's the first full week of the month, and that's what every January 1st, we give them a calendar with the first full week of the month highlighted, and they can pick up their bags that week between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. And that just helps us because we have more staff on hand at that time, and everybody's pretty good about following that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any problem? I'll take a motion.
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to accept the updated pay-as-you-throw subsidized bag policy 105 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Hearing none. All in favor by roll call? Oh, I'm sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Barbara Connolly, for bringing this to our attention tonight. Again, I want to thank Doreen for her foresight many, many years ago to have this policy in place. But I just want to extend my appreciation to you in recommending these changes tonight. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any, excuse me, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye. Motion has carried. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Barbara.
Yeah. All right. So next, we have school committee here. Thank you so much. Sorry, we kept you waiting. So we have budget discussion. So I'm not sure if you had a presentation or you just wanted to answer questions. We do have a lot of questions. Did you want to, Jay, did you want to do a short presentation, or are you just here to answer questions? You're muted.
Sorry about that, Jen. Thank you for having us. I don't have a presentation. We took the questions that we received through Monday. I think it was, 15 questions, provided those answers Monday afternoon. We can add follow-up. We can answer other questions you may have. We're here for you.
Thank you for providing those answers to those questions. I do think it's important that we do talk about some of those questions and answers, just because I don't think we're the only ones that have those questions. So,
Sure.
So I don't know if we, if anybody on the board wants to start with a question and we can see as we go through, or to make sure those questions also get discussed. No? Nobody has a question? Okay. Oh, Donna?
So I know that the state hasn't necessarily released all of its information yet, but there was a notation in here that we have a gap between the foundation aid and the actual aid of actual aid of 536,000. So your school budget could be reduced by that in Chapter 70 funds?
Yeah, Dan, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking right now. In the past, when the state has had to cut drastically Chapter 70, they do have a floor. They won't cut. They've never cut below foundation aid, but right now we get 536,000 more than foundation aid. So that's kind of what I see as the that's what I see as like the maximum that could get cut.
And any other cuts proposed in Chapter 70 that you know of, the superintendent?
Not for, I wouldn't think for Grafton. There's some other funding that might be cut, such as like circuit breaker. This year, they're able to reimburse at 75% of the reimbursement rate, but we would expect that's another area that would get cut if looking at the state's budget right now. So that could be cut in half. We get around, I think, 700,000 from that.
Any other questions, Doreen?
Yeah, thank you all for being here, first of all, and just letting us, for these questions being answered and just taking the time to walk us through. And question number 5 talked about the new teacher contract, and you provided detailed information in there, but just, for maybe a little more general information that you're willing to share with the board and the public, the process of the new teacher's contract would be helpful if there's any other details left out.
I don't think there are. It just, I can kind of read through it quickly. There are 274 people in that teacher's unit. We had a 1-year contract that was negotiated. Obviously, it was pre-coronavirus, but we had on both sides, a lot of economic question marks going forward. Teachers will receive a 1% COLA increase at the start of FY21, and then another 1% midway through the year. So that decreases the the COLA from 2% to, let's say, 1.6, 1.7. So in total, that COLA in terms of cost is about 300,000, and that's paired with approximately 400,000 for steps and lanes. For experience, and then lanes being once a teacher earns their master's or a degree or credits beyond that master's, they can move up in terms of lanes. And then we had 100,000 that we spent to increase the stipends. I believe that our stipends haven't gone up by literally a nickel in like 15 years. I've been here almost 10 years and they haven't moved a bit. That preceded me. So that just starts us moving the stipends forward to be a little bit more competitive. We have to provide tutoring for students with special needs. Say if somebody's hospitalized or they're not they come back from the hospital and need mandated tutoring, if you will. We added to that line. The rates that we had for that simply weren't competitive, and we just couldn't find tutors. And when you can't find tutors, you can't just say, I can't find a tutor. You've got to go to, you've got to privatize and go to a contractor to do that. And that's a great deal of money. We increased our subline. That was probably a very good move, given that I expect that's going to be a massive issue for us in the coming year. And then we introduced a sick leave incentive where if teachers do not utilize a certain number of sick days combined with personal days, like they've had fantastic attendance, we are going to buy back, if you will, a couple of those days at the end of the year. We agreed that we're just going to try that for 1 year. It's creative. I think it's a great incentive for us. So we're gonna try that out in the coming year. I don't believe there's anything else in that contract.
Laura?
I just would like to add one thing too that might not be clear, is that not all of our teachers advance steps and lanes every year. I think we were about half on who were just dependent on the COLA. So it's not everybody moving up steps and lanes and also getting a COLA.
Can you just, Jay touched on it a little bit, but can you explain for people watching a little bit more about the steps and lanes? Is there any performance based in there, or is it purely experience and what allows teachers to move along those steps and lanes?
So it is experience. So with each year of experience, up to 25 years, like basically when it gets, you move vertically by step. So returning to that next year, you move a step. We do have max steps. Those get down to after about 15 years of experience. It's not every year thereafter. You have to wait for 5 years and then go to 20 and then to 25. At that point, you'd max out on steps, and then you can move horizontally, and those are called lanes. And we'd have bachelors, we have a master's plus 15 credits, master's plus 30 credits, and then a doctorate level lane.
Pardon me, that leads to one of my other questions that you had answered in the packet. We do have a question on the Q&A. This was something that we had submitted questions to Dr. Cummings and the school committee that they answered in an email. Is there any way we can put that up for the public at some point?
That will go up tonight. I thought we should have the discussion first, and then I'll post it and put it up on that budget Facebook page as well.
Okay, thank you. So teachers are not the only ones that have steps and lanes, correct? Other contract employees do?
They do. They'd all basically, the teachers are unique in terms of number of lanes and number of steps. The other 4 units, so that's custodial, nursing, secretarial, and then our paraprofessionals do have, most have steps and not lanes, but steps. And you're talking, instead of say 15 steps, maybe 5. I can't do it on the spot, but I could break down each. But I think secretarial might have 6 steps. So they
Okay.
do have steps, but it doesn't look like the teacher steps do.
Okay, that was my question. Is that secretarial contract, was that just negotiated or was that negotiated a while ago?
Nope, similar 1-year contracts where they had a 2% COLA and everybody, well, I say everybody, there are 6. All 6 in that unit had a step this year and a corresponding increase.
Okay, so, and that's why their increase appears to be over 6%.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
they're getting a step
Yep, that's correct.
based on their contract that you just did.
Correct. Earlier, it was, I don't know, November, December, I'm guessing.
November, okay.
But it's not based, that step has been baked in. We didn't add that step this year, right?
Nope, they had
Yeah.
steps. It's all
So
set.
all we negotiated was the 2% COLA for 1 year. The
That's
step
right.
was always in there.
Yep,
And they all got a step based on their years of experience.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Donna?
I know there's a lot of uncertainty about this, but in here, there was a question about, hold on, cost estimates on reopening.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, have you been doing scenarios? Like, I imagine if there is some social distancing required on a bus, you're going to have more bus runs. Are you going to have to alternate students coming to school that only one quarter of, or 1/2, or whatever the population may be in the building at the same time, different students coming on different days, still having some virtual experience if that's the case, and there has to be cost associated with that. So I didn't know whether or not we have 3 different scenarios in our higher ed institution. So I didn't know if you've been projecting those out and whether or not you have cost estimates for any of those.
We've definitely been projecting them out. That's a great question. We expect certainly this week, I think it's going to be Thursday, but then again, I thought it was going to be Monday that the state's going to put out pretty clear directions. They're definitely going to be more directive than they have been to date in terms of coronavirus. So we have been running different scenarios. I think there's a very high likelihood that it will be some sort of hybrid, kind of like what you talked about. Obviously very concerned about number of buses, number of nurses and nursing staff. On a good day, coronavirus free, it's hard for us to get nursing. We have great nurses, but if somebody's out, getting a sub, for instance, on just a normal day a year ago was incredibly hard. We had to contract out through an agency because we couldn't find somebody for like a 2-month gap. I think those difficulties are going to be magnified by 10. And with that, I worry about costs. So I don't have any firm costs. I have 3 general scenarios, and every one of those scenarios literally has 10 other scenarios within it. I'm very anxious to hear what the state is asking us to do, and then figuring out how to actually make that work. Tim's been great in terms of the CARES Act, putting in for, we put everything we could think of kind of in there. We don't know what we'll get and what we won't get. We've pre-ordered even before the CARES Act. It seems like ages ago, we ordered as much PPE supplies as we could get. I'm definitely very concerned about costs. I'm super concerned about staffing, our existing staffing, never mind if we have to add anything to pick up any of these needs. So I'm not giving you a great answer, Donna, but I can tell you we have been looking at it, and I'm concerned about the costs, but I don't have an estimate at this time.
I mean, there is so much uncertainty around this for everybody, and it could change a month from now, it could change 3 months from now. In terms of when you have to let staff know, non-professional staff, whether or not they have a contract, is that date July 15th? Has it already passed?
That's a great question. It's a bit of a tricky one. We consulted through our lawyer, and we feel like we're in fantastic shape. Our contract, and we've been working closely with the GTA, our contract provides for basically some leeway with unforeseen circumstances. And one would be, obviously, it's June and we don't have the state budget. We don't know, literally don't know what the fall is going to look like. So they've been great. We've obviously reached out and notified as early as we possibly could anybody who, if the budget, COVID aside, if the budget, if we don't get the override and we need to let some people go, we've obviously communicated as early as possible with those people. So right now we're kind of in a wait and see scenario.
Thank you. It's not going to be easy.
No, I wish I had better answers for you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Peter?
Thank you. Appreciate you answering the questions I had sent earlier to you, Jay, in the school committee. I guess one question wasn't asked, and I'm kind of feeling awful I didn't ask it, but given the circumstances and the uncertainties that you're all facing, is there anything or any way that you think that the select board can help you with any initiatives, with letters to the state, to the federal government, anything that you want us to sign on to, vote, take a position on any type of resolution?
I really appreciate, and I'm sure I speak for the committee, I appreciate the thought and the sentiment. At this point, I don't think so. I think let's wait to see what happens Thursday. It's going to take us a couple weeks to kind of wrap our heads around everybody, what that actually means. And then I think we go from there. I'll definitely do my very best to update the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board in terms of where we stand and how we're looking. There are just so many variables with this. Somebody had asked about school choice. I don't know if the school choice kids, if it's a hybrid, do they stay? Do they not stay? That's a financial impact. The busing that Donna referred to is a huge question mark. If we have staff who are sick, how do we kind of handle that? We've got we're super thin. Our nurses are great, but we don't have extra. Well, you guys know we don't have extra anything, but we definitely don't have extra nursing. Special education, and I think we've done a fantastic job keeping kids in district, building up programs in district to keep kids who are oftentimes very medically fragile. Are they going to be coming back? Are they going to be looking to go out of district? All huge question marks, and they all have a cost associated with them. So I appreciate the patience, and I appreciate the ask, really. So thank you.
Laura?
Thanks, Jay. I just wanted to add on, at our meeting last week, we did pass a resolution that we sent over to Representative Meridian and Senator Moore that I can forward on to you if you guys want to take it up at a future meeting. Just basically the resolution talks about not being unfunded mandates in response to COVID. And many schools committees throughout the district, or excuse me, the state, are signing on to that. So we're having a pretty big coalition of school committees. I'm happy to send it over to you if you think your voices will add. I did hear back from Senator Moore's office, and I think they're working on it, but we felt like we had to do something. And outside of COVID, the way you can certainly help us is to continue to advocate for the override to pass next Tuesday. That would go a long way in helping us. We're seeing a lot of towns around us not being able to, falling behind, and for once Grafton is ahead of the game with our override thoughts. So we were forward thinking in March, who knew? But any support you can give to that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Doreen?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have, and again, I am aware all these unknowns, but on the contingency budget, there's a need for an elementary school counselor at both the North Street School and the Millbury Street School, if I'm correct. And
Yep.
Has there been discussion, and I say the word need because I believe there is a need for, the fact that there's one counselor to share between two schools, even that, isn't enough. Am I being corrected?
Yeah.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, through Jen.
Yeah.
We have no counselors at those schools. We're asking for one to share. We've had to cut that request. So it's actually worse. But thank you.
So yes, so that's what I was saying, and I said it incorrectly. So there are no counselors right now, and on the contingency budget, we're asking for one to be split between 2 elementary schools. That is the current situation. So on the contingency budget, my question has to do with COVID. And if there's a scenario where the kids do not return to buildings in the fall, is that still a request? Is that still part of the contingency budget? And would that counselor be available for kids virtually?
Great question. My thinking is if we, I really don't know if we'd add. Let's pretend we go with nobody comes back and we do all remote. I think we would definitely reassess everything. That one of the challenges is going to be like we've got those 3 scenarios: come back, to go return to school with some version of normalcy, with everybody back, maybe certainly masks, who knows what else. And then there's some kind of hybrid, a combination of going to school and staying remote. And then there's the third, which we've experienced for the last few months, purely remote. Another thing that kind of keeps me up at night is not knowing, they could set a plan for what happens up to Thanksgiving, say. But then at Thanksgiving, depending on how things are going, we go back to another version. Like, all that flexibility is going to make it really tough. I would think if we're back at all, the fact that we don't have a counselor there at all, we're going to need one probably more than ever if the kids do go back. So it's a tricky one. If I'm told, let's pretend this won't happen, but pretend they say all year we're going to be remote, we would probably look at taking that off the list and maybe contract for a certain number of hours. I don't know, figure out something creative. And we'd have to put more into this next iteration of remote learning. It won't look like the first iteration. It's going to have to be a lot more robust than what we were able to pull together this first time around. So I don't know. I think we'd have to look at everything at that point. But I'll stop after this. But the tricky part is they're almost definitely not going to say, all right, you're doing this for the rest of the year. They're going to say for a month, for 2 months, whatever it is. And that makes it so hard. If we're remote for the whole year, do we need as many nurses? Probably not. But if it's a hybrid or we're really back, we need more nurses. I hope I'm being clear. It's this spectrum for every position. It's kind of driving me insane.
No, I know. And Jay, you're definitely being clear. And I guess my point is there would be particularly in this time, a need for a virtual counselor sessions for, students. And then even if they move into the classroom, so if it started that way. So I was just curious about what the plan was, since that's the only position that's being added on the contingency budget. So thank you. You answered my question.
You're welcome.
I think that brings me to another question. If you guys can just clarify what exactly is in your contingency budget, because I think there's been so many changes and alterations and just so that it's clear for people to know what is included in that. I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I think the best way to sum it up. So we would add back what we reduced in terms of supplies, technology, professional development, money for utilities, capital, and maintenance. Then we would add back 3 paraprofessional positions. We would have some kind of pay increase for administration. We would, in theory, put back that elementary level counselor position in some form. That's the only new position that would be added. So those are the central components in terms of changes that would be going back into the budget if the override was to pass.
But Jay, we'd also
I'm sorry. I thank you, Laura. the assistant principal at the high school, and 3 teaching positions. Was there anything else, Laura? Or was that it?
I think you got it. I would have led with those, but that's me.
I forgot temporarily.
So much on your mind.
Did I see a hand? I'm sorry, I was taking notes. No, Doreen?
What's the pay increase for the administration if in the contingency budget?
It was going to be that 1-in-1, just to mirror the COLA for the teaching unit, and the total was just under 30,000, 29,824.
Would that be something, negotiable based on what comes back for state aid?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if that's cut, I think we look at, depending on how big it is, we have to look at everything, of course.
Laura, did you have
No,
your
I
hand up?
lit up, but I had nothing to say.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I just need to clarify. So in the regular budget, there are, you're adding 2 positions, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Either way, we're adding 2 special education positions, override or
Okay.
no override.
Now, the assistant principal and the 3 paraprofessionals, and what were the other ones?
3 teachers.
Are those, I don't remember those being cut previously from, I don't remember those being on the table before. So can you talk about that, or were they always there?
Yeah, they were always there. We just added with the last, what was it, a week ago, we cut 114,000. Those were already included in the reductions. We added that, we had to take out that new guidance position, and we took out the 3 paraprofessional positions. And then the administrative pay freeze, and then the difference, it was only a couple $1,000, was additional reductions in technology. So those were in there.
Okay.
With the AP.
So our original, from the select board, we did not, when we had budget discussions and when we had to make the reductions from COVID, many of us were willing to use stabilization to fund that gap. And now you guys are taking 114,000 of what I was fine with using stabilization, so you wouldn't have to make those cuts.
Yeah.
And I understand that was a recommendation from FinCom, but I just wanted to get your feedback. How do you feel about that? Would you rather, use stabilization and not have to make those cuts?
Of course, but I certainly understand it and assume that with reduction in state aid, we're going to be pushed as a town to probably access that stabilization, those stabilization monies. So we understood it on the school end. We worked with Tim and just doing the best with the direction that we have.
Okay. Any other, Laura?
Madam Chair, just a side note, interestingly enough, Amy and Dan and I were at a seminar last night, virtual seminar about bargaining in the post-COVID world. And one of the advice they gave us was to not try to use stabilization funds, which made me feel better, because I was initially, if you watch our school committee meeting, one of my concerns was actually the pay raises for our administrative staff. We had just had, I don't know if you saw, we had Principal of the Year from North Street School on, and then after he left, we talked about how he wasn't getting a pay raise, and I talked about it a little bit at our meeting. But then last night we even heard again that was probably one of the worst things we could be doing at this time, was to fund things with stabilization, because we're going to have some hard times. So I think we're going to probably be thankful that we haven't touched it. But side note from my seminar that we went to last night.
Any other questions from the board? I have a couple that are in the weeds. So I just want to make sure everybody else has some. And I apologize if you've already gone over this stuff with FinCom, but I noticed, congratulations to Dan. Dan is moving on. But I noticed his salary was kind of level funded. And I wanted to know if there was thought on that, because I'm assuming Anita is not making the same as Dan.
Yeah, the difference is going to be made up basically with the mentorship program through MASBO, which is the Mass Association of School Business Officials. So with any first year person in that role, the district partners with MASBO and pays a fee for pretty intensive but critical mentoring throughout the entire year. So the difference should be very, very small.
So would that be on the expenses line, or that would be on the salary line?
I don't know if we've broken it out yet. Dan, have you?
Yeah, I think it's going to get paid out of the salary line, and then the following year, FY22 budget, that line would be able to be reduced because the mentoring wouldn't be needed for the second year. So I think that's when you'll see the reduction.
Okay, thank you. And I also have a question. So I have the budget that you submitted in December, and I'm looking at the executive assistant salary. So the superintendent's executive assistant. So in fiscal year 20 approved as of November 19th, the salary was 47, oh, I need my glasses, like 668 or something like that, but it was like 47,000. And then fiscal year budget went up to 48,780. But on the new budget that you guys posted, that line says preliminary budget as of January 2020. And that number, that 47 turns into 53. And then it goes for fiscal year 21 to 55,463.
Yeah,
so
I
I'm
can.
just hoping you can explain that.
Yeah, I can answer that. I think the difference is $6,000. I had made an error in a budget transfer that the school committee had approved. I had put it on the wrong line, so it was a $6,000 adjustment that was supposed to be on a different line. So I fixed that in the new version. So it's actually supposed to go on the substitute line.
So that individual didn't receive a $6,000 increase?
No, she did get an increase, but it wasn't $6,000.
Okay.
There was there was a lot of changes that the same person wasn't in that position from FY19 budget to FY20 budget. There was 3 different, almost all the offices, we switched around positions. So I was trying to adjust with the budget transfers to get the positions lined up correctly. Because we had somebody leave and Jay's executive assistant left. Somebody came from my office over there. Then somebody came from the SPED office into the finance office. And then we replaced that person. So I was trying to get the adjustments correct, but I did it incorrectly on that line.
Is that when you're talking about the SPED person, is that the SPED person that retired was making 95 and then you hired?
No, this is just the secretary, the secretaries. So we had the secretary from the SPED office came over to be the payroll specialist. And then we hired a new special education secretary.
Okay.
Jay, do you maybe want to clarify and talk about how that we hired, we lost some people and several people are taking over for more positions, but they're doing with less people, so more work with less people?
Sure. Yeah. So up through 19, we had 6 positions in terms of central office support staff doing payroll, accounts payable, lots of secretarial stuff. circuit breaker management, special education, and a specialty. So we had 6 positions. We wanted to make them more competitive in terms of pay for sure, but we were a little stuck. We had 2 people leave that left 4 positions. So we therefore took advantage of that. We restructured, provided pay increase that Dan spoke to. I think we're providing even better service and more specialization. We increased some people who were like 35 hours a week. We moved them up to 40. So while we were able to do all of that, we overall decreased by 1.5 FTE, which was obviously, that's a very good thing for us. So.
Is that why on the bookkeeper's line item, the amount went up a little bit from the fall into January, but it also reduced the FTEs from 2 to 1.75? So it looks like there's
part of it.
We're paying a little bit more for, instead of 2 full FTEs, for 1.75.
As Dan mentioned, we did that with special ed. We did that in my office. And we did that with payroll. So everything combined, the decrease was about 1.5. We took that 0.5 piece and put it into additional hours and salary.
Can you just direct me where that's shown in the budget book? Because I can see where the increases are, but I can't really see where those decreases are.
Dan, you may have to send Jen like a.
I think FTE, in terms of FTE on the budget lines, I can pull it up. I think it just shows the 0.25 decrease.
You're going to have to end up going back to 18. I think it was. You're going to have to capture Debney's leaving.
Yeah, which is in FY19.
Michelle. So why don't you just break that all out and then just send it to Jen and the committee?
Yeah, I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay, so you use the savings from a retirement to redistribute the money among staff that you already had. Is that
Correct.
What I'm hearing?
Yep.
All right, yeah, if you can give the breakdown of that, that would be really helpful.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board? Ed?
I think you're muted, Ed.
Ed, we can't hear you.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, we cannot hear Ed. Nothing, Ed. Ed, leave the meeting and come back into it.
Okay,
Jen, can I ask one question for both bodies?
sure.
So we made application to the CARES Act, and that was extremely convoluted because there's money that comes from the state to the CARES Act will cover things that are not covered by FEMA. And then we get 25% of what's not eligible from FEMA through the CARES Act. I know that sounds worse than it is, but it took me a day to figure it out. Anyways, the full amount for Grafton is 1.6. We had to estimate spend to date and then looking forward, which Jay and Dan did a great job of coming up with about 1.1. So we submitted today for 764,500, both realized cost to date and future estimated cost. We'll have to deal with the FEMA reimbursement portion at a later date, maybe through another agency and not the the A&F division of the governor's office. So I just wanted to update the board that that is in place and those funds will be available to offset some of our costs to date and any future things that the school needs to do to provide for education moving forward starting in September. So having said that, those monies are not going to be used to offset revenues or any other kind of lost income. I just want us to, no one has to answer this question, but I just want us to kind of coalesce around the idea that if the worst case that Dan brought to us tonight is, you know, 536,000 above the foundation budget gets reduced, you know, I would certainly want to recommend to this body and to town meeting to use stabilization to get us through that hurdle, because that's exactly what the policies call for this community. And I just want to say it and see if people coalesce around it, or if we're going to work to somehow reduce that, which I think would be catastrophic. But I just want to put it out there. I know the seminars say you shouldn't and we shouldn't, but at the end of the day, we're never involved in a pandemic like this. And there's loss of revenue for state income tax from the state of Massachusetts could be severe. We just don't know what it'll be. And that's why we're not taking severe action now. But if they are to come to fruition in August or September or October, how do people generally feel about using stabilization to shore up those accounts?
Madam Chair.
Peter?
Thank you. Tim, you bring up some really good points and some options. Personally, I'm not ready to answer that question tonight. I wasn't not really prepared to really analyze and put my head around that. Could we potentially put that on the next meeting agenda and we can discuss that at length? I think right now it's too early, but at least that's my opinion.
Doreen?
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, Tim. My initial, I agree with Peter in the sense that I'd want to give it a little more thought into the details of what that would mean. But my initial reaction is if it's going to be catastrophic cuts, that yes, that is the time we use stabilization. So not, you know, especially if we're saving that right now and making all the cuts we can. If we're going to see something catastrophic, particularly to the school system, that's when we would want to use stabilization, and I would be in favor of that.
Ed?
You guys hear me?
Yep.
All right. All right. So first, I want to thank school committee for coming out tonight. And I appreciated the board's questions to the school committee. Learning is always good. Getting additional information is always good. Asking questions is always good. I sort of wish that we took the same attitude towards our own budget, but okay, we're baby steps. As far as stabilization goes, you know, it's a red flag indicator for any community to use one-time money on ongoing expenses. I think we all know that, which is why I would assume that everybody on this board would support the override push. However, if we're not going to do that, you know, I'm with Peter on this. You know, we had a very difficult discussion about the contingency budget that a couple weeks ago. And I know that Finance Committee had a difficult discussion with the town administrator a couple weekends ago about shrinking that $141,000 gap. The school committee's done good work on their end to actually make cuts. I'm curious to hear, you know, what cuts were proposed on our end and how we can avoid getting into stabilization, given the importance of our bond rating that we've talked about over and over and over again for the past 5 or 6 years. And given that, you know, again, everybody talks about the uncertainty out there. We don't know. If the override doesn't pass this year, we definitely know that next year could well be worse, both from a funding of public services and from a state aid end. You know, there is a second round of COVID predicted. We don't know what that's going to do to the economy. We could be in a prolonged recession. So jumping into stabilization right off the bat in the first chance we get is not appealing to me. So I would much rather take a wait and see approach on stabilization than I would on an override.
Madam Chair, if I could just make one point clarification relative to the discussion with the Finance Committee. It was about Article 5 and the balanced budget pre the contingent budget. So there's certainly a difference of opinion I've learned from Finance Committee from what I proposed, but we've never coalesced or reconciled what their proposal is versus mine for the contingent budget. All the work that Jay and I did for those reductions happened in Article 5, not having an override in place. So it was not the contingent budget that we reconciled.
I thought I saw a hand, but now I don't. All right, any other questions for school committee? I don't see any. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you taking time out of your lives to be here.
Thank you. Yes.
And if we have any other questions, wait, I just want to check the Q&A just one quick to make sure. Nope, there was just a comment. Ed, did you have something to say? I didn't see, no, okay. I didn't think I saw a hand, but I was just checking. Okay, and so thank you, school committee, for coming in. I appreciate it. And if we have any questions, we certainly can contact you directly.
Absolutely.
And I encourage people watching, if they have questions for school committee, to also contact them directly because they will be happy to answer. And the questions that we submitted, Jay had said he could get
They're going up within 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good night.
Saturday.
Thank you.
Saturday. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay. Next, we have a resignation, election worker.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Molly Zerillo as an election worker.
Second.
Zariello.
Zariello, thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Stock eye.
Allison, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye. Motion is carried.
You're on mute, Jen.
Sorry. Select board appointments. We have a affordable housing, Dan Kusher. If you're in the meeting and you want to be seen, we certainly can do that. Just
He had told me earlier in the week that he didn't, or today that he didn't get the link.
well, he could watch as a participant and then we can upgrade him. That's what I was just asking. Oh, there he
There he
is. Yep.
Hi.
Thank you. Just to do the roll call, I'm just going to say Dan Kusher. Can you just say you're here?
Dan Kusher here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have, do you want to talk for a couple minutes on why you would like to be on the Affordable Housing Trust?
Sure. I think affordable housing is really important. I've kind of noticed it's one of those topics that keeps kind of coming up over and over again. And until recently, I hadn't really seen a whole lot of progress, although the 8 Pine Street, I think it was, that big project, that looks really promising. So that looks great. I would like to get more involved and try to kind of help us get to that 10% that the 40B law is trying to encourage communities to get to. I think it's worth noting that the 8 Pine Street project will bring us close to that 10%, but not quite there. So there is still more work for the trust to do, and I want to help get that last little bit. So that I'd volunteer.
Does anybody have any questions for Dan? No? All right. I just want to say, for me, I take appointments really seriously. You know, we're putting our name with that appointment. And I know there's always some disagreements among that. So just for me, I'm sure this one will fly through, but I am going to be a no because I can't put my name next to somebody that I don't feel like can represent the town in a positive manner. So just to explain myself before the vote.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I don't want to put my name as endorsing your appointment to this board.
Aye.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
Peter,
I move the board vote to appoint Dan Kushner to the Affordable Housing Trust for a 2-year term due to expire on June 30th, 2021.
do I have a
Second.
second? I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just said I think that was unfair that what you just did right there.
Well, there's a motion and a second, and I'm not going to discuss my position. I explained my position, and we
But you
all
didn't,
have.
though. You're a public
Okay,
official.
I am
who
not going to explain myself to you. I already told you, I gave my opinion, and everybody can vote the way they want to vote, and I just said it up front. And
Well, you
that is,
didn't, though, Jen. You took a shot at the
Ed,
guy, and now you're
I
talking
didn't
about her.
take a shot at him. I personally don't feel like I can support this appointment.
Well,
That
you
is,
could have just
I'm
voted
not going to
no.
get into nitty, Ed, I am not going to churn up stuff. I'm just saying it and I'm leaving it there. So you can roll your eyes at me all you want and you can talk
been
back
churned up.
and be a baby, but I'm just telling you that there's a motion and a second, and I am choosing to vote in a particular way.
Okay.
All in favor by roll call.
Frisbee, aye.
Aye.
Fazio, nay.
Thomas, nay.
Stock abstain.
Wow. And no explanation. Just a
What's going on
vague
here,
drag through the
guys?
mud.
What's going on?
I explained myself, so we're gonna move
But you
on.
didn't.
You
When I
specifically
opposed-
refused to explain yourself.
When I opposed somebody
I-
else's nomination last week, I did a good job of it. I actually went into detail about
No,
specifically
no,
why.
No, Ed, we are not talking about this. This
No,
can
so-
be put on the agenda at another time.
I guess it will after the election for sure.
Yeah, maybe. All right, we're moving on to the annual appointments. They're up by list.
All right. Madam Chair? Madam Chair?
Yes, Peter,
Move the board vote to the approve the annual appointments as per the appointment list dated June 16, 2020.
do I have a second? Did I not hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Donna?
Can we put up the list of annual appointments?
Becca, do you have that?
I've got it. Thank you. I didn't realize it was in our packet. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thank you. Motion is carried. I believe we're passing over the purchase and sale agreement for 8 Pine Street, Tim, is that right?
Madam
That's
Chair?
correct. I'm working on getting Ginny Kramer in a Zoom meeting with
Excuse me,
GSX.
Mr. McInerney, I apologize. We did skip over an agenda item tonight for town administrator appointments. I didn't know before.
Oh,
McInerney
I
went into the-
apologize. We did. Town administrator appointments.
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to affirm the annual town administrator appointments as per the appointment list dated June 16, 2020.
You want to put
Do I
that up
have-
on the screen too, so you see him, or
Sure.
there's Traffic Safety Committee, Recreation, Public Works, Keeper of the Lockup, Burial Agent, Board of Sewer Commissioners, and the Assessor. So those are the only ones, and nothing no one's new to these particular committees.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Clark, aye.
Fazio, aye.
Bridget, aye.
Thomas, aye. A motion has carried. So we are passing over the purchase and sale agreement. And so next, oh, Tim, do you want to finish your thought on what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want anybody to think there's anything to be nervous about. It's just getting attorneys to get on a call together to work out those details. We're pushing them together. They made contact today. I'm waiting for them to set up a sequence of meetings and hold to dates to get that document done. It was a document that was in the RFP, so it shouldn't be that much of a stretch for them to get agreement on. So I know I probably won't have a meeting on the election for the 23rd, but the 30th or the 7th, it'll be back before the board.
Okay, thank you. Next chapter 61A, withdrawal 42, 44, 46 East Street.
So the way I understand this is this lands in 61A. Boards and committees have an opportunity to offer their opinion to the board, whether they want to exercise their right of first refusal or not. It's being divvied up, I think, by 3 brothers who own abutting properties. The only group that's not really affiliated with the town is the water district, as they abut the property. Doing this will not, prohibit the water district from making their own deal with the owners of the property, but it'll come out as rollback taxes that are due to the town of about $7,500, and then the land itself will be part of the value of all other parcels of land. So it's just, I think it's just an equal distribution of the land between all 3 owners. It wasn't 61A that is coming out for those people to enjoy that use. I don't know if there's a map. I didn't really look at the detail on the agenda. I have a different report up, so I don't have a map of the land. If people want it, I can Google the address.
We have a map.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any questions for Tim? Ed?
Does it have anything to do with the guy over there with the dam and Hayes Pond?
No, I think that's a different address. I do not think so, but I don't want to say no definitively, but I don't think that name's associated with this, with the documents. That's George. What is George's last name? I don't think it is. That's a short answer. I think it's the other side of the street.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll take a motion when you guys are ready.
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to not exercise its right to purchase the 1.16 acre parcel of land, map 28, lot 9 of 42 East Street.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? By roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Fazio,
Thomas,
aye.
aye. Okay, motion has carried. Next, we have select board reports. Are there any boards of the select board? Reports of the members? Donna?
Madam Chair, I thought the motion was just for lot 42. Is it supposed to be for 44 and 46 as well?
Let me double check.
So the motion is different from what's in the agenda item.
Tim, do you have any clarification on that?
In a minute, I'm trying to pull up the map and the notice. Hold on.
Board of Assessors memo just has it as map 28 lot 9 of 42 East Street. Conservation Commission talks about lots 42, 44, 46 East Street.
I think it's one lot that they're dividing equally in thirds.
Yeah.
42 East Street is one big parcel of land.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Becca.
So is that, we're fine with our motion, or do we need to redo it?
No, you were fine.
Okay. All right. Select board reports. Any? I don't see any. TA report.
Okay, I'm going to try and be brief. Regarding the 112 budget that you voted on last week, we did submit that to the Department of Revenue. DLS will get back to us in 5 to 10 days. Hopefully we don't need it. Town meeting goes off without a hitch. It won't be a problem. Again, we were doing that just to hedge in the event of a non-approval prior to July 1. The reopening of the municipal center, the chair touched on it earlier. It will be by appointment only for the first week, starting the 29th. That is a short week. We have limited staff that can actually track people coming in the front door. So that's the appointment only by limited hours. We, for the 112, 15 days that we've been doing this, staff is, on Zoom calls, on telephone calls, returning messages, returning emails, on top of things. So we're functioning just as if we were here. It's a little more convenient for someone to walk up and pull the door and come in and get service. But we need to protect the staff that's here. We've done some internal adjustments to workspaces to keep the public who does come in safe from us and us safe from them. So we've taken those precautions with tape on the floor and modified doorways to offer customer service through glass. So it will work. It's going to work. But again, we want to be cautious and keep everybody as safe as possible. So that's the 29th. And then, best case scenario, the 13th, provided other guidance from the governor to reopen. That would be the goal. Still restricting us to not more than 10 people congregating in one place at one time. So that makes it a little difficult to do that, even though there is guidance for office spaces being at 25% capacity, but that's tough to judge because we are a huge building and we'll never really be at 25% capacity. So we're working on those particular pieces. As people come in the building, they do sign in, whether they're staff or otherwise. We have a Google Doc so people don't have to sign in every day with paper. They can just use the Google Doc to do that. So that's a good workaround just to keep tracking statistics to be able to reach people in the event of an illness. Other pieces, town meeting logistics is just kind of a big deal to get 500 chairs in the field and a lot of volunteers from CERT and MRC and volunteer firefighters and DPW to set things up. So the list kind of goes on and on. So that's what we've been working on last week and this week. Audio system, FM modulators. There's just a lot of details that go into it. We will do a code red call tomorrow relative to town meeting just to give people, a 30-second message that town meeting is being held. And if they do come, they should bring water and sunscreen. And Ray, from our discussions with him, he wants to keep it moving and get people through town meeting as quickly as possible. You all know we have 9 special warrant articles and we have 41 annual. So it's not a short order to do that, wrap it up before noontime, but I think that's Ray's hope. But we do have a logistics meeting again on Friday and then again Saturday morning for future setup. Yes.
Through you,
Anna,
Madam
did you
Chair,
have
to
your
Tim.
hand up?
Yes. What's the plan for in the event of rain? When will that call be made? I know there's thunderstorms projected for that day. Are we making it the night before? Are we making it at 8 o'clock in the morning?
I think it'll be a game time decision. I think they're afternoon thunderstorms if they're to be had. That's at least what I can see now. Ray will make that call upon opening. I don't unless it's pouring at 7 o'clock in the morning, I think town meeting will go on until the rain happens and the moderator calls the meeting.
Thank you.
Doreen?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, follow up to that question, would that be communicated through Code Red as well? So residents would know a game time decision through Code Red?
If we cancel at 7:30 in the morning, yes, we could do that. I don't know how people who weren't planning on going will take to a phone call at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, but we could.
Doreen?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I just had one more question regarding the reopening on the 29th. And if Tim, there's any specifics for the senior center? Is that going to be included in the reopening? And what does that look like as far as appointment only for seniors? Is everything the same as the rest of the municipal center, or are there any?
No, the library operations and senior center will come online after we come online in stages after us, so we can learn from our mistakes opening the main building. They want to get to grab and go lunches first, but that's probably not going to happen until July. I think Barbara and I talked about that today. And then they're modifying vans this week or next to do limited transportation for doctor's visits and such. And they have, equipment, cleaning equipment, disinfectant, masks, all kinds of stuff. Limited ridership on each bus, however. But they will come after the 29th, so into July.
Thank you.
I have a question from Justin Wood. So far, official documents sent out, including Ray's video, did not mention radio or sitting in the car. Is it still expected to be available? And do we have documents that can be shared on how that process interacts with the rest of the process?
We do have an FM modulator. It hasn't been tested. It's coming on Friday. We'll test it on Friday. In terms of how it interacts, if people chose to sit in their car until the article they're interested in comes up, they can listen to it on that FM station, which we will probably have on the changeable message board sign outside of the parking lot at the municipal center. Tune in to whatever station it is. They'll listen. I think Ray will encourage people at the start of the reading of a motion to get people into the gym or onto the field if they plan on voting. So that'll be the interaction for FM modulator. So other quick items list, there's other points on that.
Any other questions?
So the CARES Act I covered in detail. We all know that Anita left our employ. The consultant that we had working while she was here to do the book close a couple of years ago, kind of much like that mentor program they were talking about, huh? It's interesting, just different terminology. That consultant is Eric Kinchereff, and he has, been a great consultant for many municipalities throughout. I need to have some resource there. We have the worst time to not have an accountant because the assistant is going on maternity leave in July. So that's going to cause a problem in a vacuum. So I need to recommend to the board the hiring or the appointment, and on a temporary basis, Eric Kinchereff's firm, who's a certified CPA. So I prepared that memo today and want to move that along to your review and approval at an upcoming meeting. But I needed to engage him now to make sure I have good transition and good cash flow management, cash management, oversight of purchase orders, and so forth. So that's it's kind of operationally the things that have been happening. It's a lot of stuff, even though it was a short report. Becca, is there anything that you want to add that I might have missed?
No.
That was a very quick no. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we do not have any correspondence. Discussion, revitalization of Grafton Green Communities Committee, sorry, Doreen.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So based on, pretty self-explanatory, based on our discussion last week, there's a copy of an updated charge for the Scrapped and Recycling Solid Waste Study Committee that incorporates all the feedback from last week.
Anybody have any questions on the current charge or the charge in front of us tonight? Okay. If not, I'll take a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to accept the Grafton Recycling Solid Waste Study Committee as presented in the June 16, 2020 memo.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Stark eye.
Pasio, aye.
Thomas, aye. Oh, all right, the motion is carried. Next we have 21 budget. Tim, did you have anything new to share, or was this something we were gonna?
No, there's a couple of quick things. Obviously, we're balanced. We aren't using stabilization based on the discussion between the finance committee, school committee, and our staff. We do have a memo that we're sending out. I may be able to get it out tonight if I walk by a copier. That details the FY20 special town meeting adjustments, which is all within the appropriation, but it's all budget related. And then Article 5 and how we got to a balanced budget without using stabilization. And then Article 6, the contingent budget, there's some discrepancy between what I'm proposing and what finance committee's proposing. So the budget, the document that we're going to provide will kind of analyze both of those points of view. And I hope we can reconcile those differences on Thursday during the logistics meeting with finance committee. And as for revenue for this fiscal, for where we are now, for collections of real estate and personal property, we are at 97% collection rate. I can't give you what that total is. It's close to 38 million bucks. All other receipts are exceeding our expenses coming up to year end, and some significant gains inside the building department for the whole year. Even during COVID, there's been a lot of permits taken out. I can't give you a quantifiable total because we just switched over from paper to the new permit view software. So in the future, I'll be able to provide, monthly reports on what those numbers are, and they'll just be at the touch of a button. So that'll be a lot easier to get than looking through a queue of paper to figure out how many permits we have. But in terms of revenue for that line, just building permits alone, we are exceeding the revenue estimate almost by 40%. So in terms of having liquidity and being ahead of our expense curve versus revenues, for this fiscal year anyways, 20, we're going to be fine as the fiscal year ends July 1.
Tim, what's in our contingent budget now, and where do we differ from finance committee's recommendations?
Tim had mentioned there's a memo that outlines all of that he's going to send tonight so that we can have the discussion on Thursday. I don't know if it makes sense to try to have that discussion without all the information in front of us.
Well, I would have liked the information tonight, seeing as how we did a whole song and dance with the school committee. It would be nice on Tuesday to have this information on our side as well.
Sure, we can. The finance committee, did their level best relative to being on a Zoom call and trying to put information together to get to what the reduction should be to not use stabilization. And we got there. Some of the things that they would.
I'm sorry, hold on. I was called out last week for not being online here. Where's Donna? Is there rules that only apply to me? Thank you.
So Becca, can you pull up the two charts for the tables submitted by finance committee? Because they have the reserve fund at 25,000. Should the override pass, the police department equipment gets restored at 12,000. The fire department expense line $2,400. The fire department equipment, which we're slated to use free cash in a warrant article of 102, they restore that. And then fire department personnel, 2 deputy chiefs. I think that's a misquote by the finance committee because the fire study report talks about 2 full-time captains, and they have 210 in there. School restoration, 267. Salary restoration for personnel was 86,721. Highway expenses, we had originally reduced 150. 150 was from the tree account, and 100 was we were going to use Chapter 90 to offset those costs. They restored 100 of the 150, which I think that aligns with us. So what this memo does, it just gives a crosswalk between the two. And if Becca pulls it up, I can show you what the two are. But just off the top for those 2 items that are in here, the deputy fire chief, which are captains, are not in my proposal, for example. And they're not in my proposal for a couple of reasons. One is it's going to take time to hire a chief. It's going to be a process. We are going through an assessment center. I talked to Ray, I talked to other committee members. I will take a broad approach in terms of the selection committee. Certainly not everybody on that committee can sit on the panel because scheduling anything with that many people is going to be impossible. But I certainly will bring those people in. So I'm looking at four staff and 3 of those committee members, and Ray and I have discussed that at length. But we need to have that chief on the ground ahead of time. In best case, he starts in October. At the same time, we'll have notice about the SAFER grant. And then if we can get a lay of the land, because this person who we're going to hire is going to respond to calls. So if we have 1.4 calls a day and they take 2 or 3 hours, there's not a lot of time left in the day just to focus on hiring 2 full-time administrative folks. So I want them to be in the building, get a lay of the land, and then move forward with that selection process for the captains, as it were. The other places that would be restored under my proposal, there's a lot, and if you read it, you'll get it. Nelson Park and Trust, there was to make up the shortfall of not using contingency or not using stabilization. There was a $25,000 reduction in those line items. They have a trust that they've had for a long time. Former administrators have used those funds to offset operating costs, and that's what we're proposing to do for $25,000 of the reduction to not use the 190, if you will, from stabilization. And then I forget what the actual number was, Becca, for the reduction in salary increases for the 2% to be frozen. Was that 76,617? Did I lose Becca?
No, I'm here, sorry. No, so just the salary adjustments, those are 41,121. So that's just bringing non-union from 2% to 0.
All right, so the other 30 is not having the economic development coordinator.
Can I just put something on the screen? It might be helpful. Sure. What we're talking about. Okay. So, like Tim said, this is the finance committee's proposal, which they put together after the Saturday meeting that we had. The whole number is 909,121. There are a couple of pieces in here that do need some additional clarification, namely the salary restoration and the TBD to be cut. When we met on Saturday, there was an agreement made between Tim and Jay that they would go back to the table and figure out how best to come up with the balance. So, you know, the detail on this line, I think, is going to be brought out through the process that we actually went through with Jay in terms of the reductions that we had to make to get to the 190,721. So I'm just going to switch to This page. So on the left-hand side here, this is the contingent budget that Tim will put forward in Article 6. So there's a lot more lines here, and that's just because it's the detail that's included in those two lines that the Finance Committee didn't have detail on, just because we hadn't fleshed out what those numbers are actually going to be through the process with Jay. So the total for the proposed contingent budget for Tim is $758,375. The major difference there is the two deputy captains that the Finance Committee is proposing in July. On the right-hand side, I tried to break down a little bit further where we depart from the Finance Committee with respect to recommendations. So in this first column, this represents the 2% adjustments that we made for salaries for non-union. And then at the bottom here, you'll see the $25,000 for Nelson Park and Library, $17,000 for personnel, and $8,000 for expenses, totaling $25,000, which will come from the trust funds that they have available. They have about $100,000 in those funds available to be used. So if the override does not pass, they will have to utilize $25,000 of those trust funds to fund the ongoing maintenance of the park. In the middle column here, this is the salary increases that are being proposed above 2% that we are requesting be restored should the override pass. So you'll see anybody that Tim has put forward a request above 2% for FY21, that's going to be reflected in this middle column. It's highlighted red because the Finance Committee doesn't support at this time funding any salary increases over 2% in the event that the override were to pass. In the final column is other, so these are largely expenses, things that aren't included up here. So you have the reserve fund. Finance Committee does want to restore that. Finance Committee does not want to restore the $2,000 to IT expenses. They are in favor of restoring the police equipment, the fire equipment, the fire expenses, and the highway expenses, like Tim said. And they do not appear to be in favor of restoring expenses to the library department or restoring the economic development coordinator. This school department number here reflects the $214,000 that they needed initially for the override, plus the $52,180 that they cut in the first round of reductions, plus the $114,000 that they cut in this last round after the meeting with the Finance Committee.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, Becca. Jen, I'm sorry. I've got multiple screens here, so I can see Donna had her hand up with a question. I didn't know if you wanted to address it now. I just didn't want her to lose her train of thought with any questions she may have. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Okay. Donna, did you have a question?
How close are you to finishing up, Becca?
That's pretty much it. So that's what the 381 reflects. So that's a total of 758, 375 with rounding. I think there's a rounding issue here, which will be put forth for Tim's recommendation for Article 6. So I'm done. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
So my question through you, Jen, is aren't these positions the one that we voted on last week to keep at the salary level that was recommended by the town administrator?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, when we were going to use the 190 of stabilization, all these numbers on the right-hand side were included in that.
And when did they make this recommendation?
June 4th, they didn't make this recommendation. They made another recommendation, which included a variety of reductions to operations, which we didn't make those. We didn't agree to those. They were far afield, in my opinion. So we came and landed on this. Well, not this, but the Article 5 language relative to a balanced budget, not using stabilization.
So So maybe this is going to be resolved on Thursday night, I guess, in terms of what the discrepancy are.
We certainly can have a discussion, but again, this is, FinCom is an advisory committee, and this is what they are advising, but we don't have to take recommendations from them. They're an advisory committee.
Yeah, they are an advisory committee. They're not an advisory committee to us. They're an advisory committee to the town that votes on the budget at town meeting floor. So it would be advisable for us to come to some resolution with them so that we don't look like we're two completely separate factions warring over what basically $20,000, although it's more than that, right? It's an approach. So when you look at what finance committee is recommending versus what the town administrator is recommending, really what the finance committee is saying is hire the fire department personnel and don't give the planned pay increases that I made a recommendation to cut out of the contingency budget. That's basically the long and the short of it, right?
There's also they also do not wish to hire back our economic development coordinator.
Yeah, I can't blame them, frankly. You know, I think the program, I think the idea is a good one, but I don't know that right now what we need to do is fund that particular position. That, by the way, I think was paid out of stabilization, not stabilization, but overlay, right, a couple of years in a row. I think we need to work on quantifying that position and measuring results rather than hiring the position and say that we're working on economic development. I think that gives the select board an out. I think it's an easy out for us. I think that as a board together, we haven't done very much to effort economic development. We sort of say, well, we hired this guy. And until you can quantify that for me, I think I'd be with FinCom on this one.
All right, I disagree, but I hear your opinion. Any other questions? We certainly can discuss this on Thursday, but.
Madam Chair, I don't know if you can see me.
Oh, sorry, I can't. There you go.
Through you to Tim, I just would like the question answered about the two captains positions that that FinCom is recommending, and what Mr. Prisby just explained about taking, you know, essentially the increases in salaries and sort of replacing them with those two positions. But what you're saying is that under your recommendation, those two positions really can't be hired next year because the timeline of hiring a chief and then hiring two captains, we're going to go through an entire fiscal year anyway, right? So it doesn't make sense to put those in the budget.
Yeah, there's two variables. Is one is the SAFER grant, which we hope to get, which we might know that as early as July. But to have them in ahead of even October before we actually get the head person who's going to be in the leadership position in the department, and have them that be the first thing they spend all their time on, when I have to do inspections, 26F inspections, plan review, training, equipment maintenance, and respond to calls on top of that. And we're looking for a very special person that can bring a call department that we've been very good with, and the people who are loyal. And I have to make sure we don't alienate those folks by going too fast into this process. And getting that very special person on board is going to take some time. So I don't want to mislead folks, budget for it, charge the taxpayer the money, and then not fulfill it because of other things that happen on the ground during the day that doesn't allow me to. So I would propose October before you set the tax rate. If everything aligns and we get the chief in, then you can budget for it. Or I would recommend that you budget for it at that point, provided the override passes.
Maureen?
Thank you. And just a follow up to that. So, you know, let's say the grant comes in, or, you know, we hire a chief in October and we still want them to settle in for a couple of months before other positions are hired. The other piece of this is lack of state aid. We could sort of use the lever of not doing those pay increases if they were in the budget, and then we find out later that we can't use them because we want to use them for, other positions, let's say.
Yeah, and I think people have to remember town meeting is the legislative body to appropriate money. We all still, on a day-to-day basis, get to control the expenses. And in some points, the revenue, right? You set bag fees, you can change building permit fees. So if we find out in the day after town meeting, the state aid's going to be reduced, we can make adjustments for whatever that reduction is and not act as if we have the money, and then still wait till October to make those adjustments to set the tax rate. So we'll still manage that cash flow, if you will, on a day-to-day basis.
Peter?
Yeah, I just want to remind the committee and Tim that the Fire Study Committee met for a whole year and was extremely adamant about funding those positions this fiscal year and not waiting, and that at a future town meeting things could be drastically changed, and these positions in a conjunction with the chief are crucial to that department in modernizing it. And the whole committee was in agreement. We adopted the report a couple of weeks ago, and I understand the situation we're in, but we have been significantly cutting the fire department budget for years. I know we purchased capital product components, but from an operating and expense line item, their asks go back to all the other budgets that they've ever presented to Grafton for the past 15 years. And you can talk to some of the people who are on finance committee and who presented the fire budgets. Their proposals have always been cut. So,
I disagree with that. I disagree with that, Peter.
Well, let me finish, Tim. Okay, but that's been the trend. And the other way I can point to that is when you look at other fire departments in the area and look at the significant gap for what we have an expense for a line item for our department compared to other departments. And granted, even if you were to subtract out a couple of the full-time members that they have, you will see that there's a huge discrepancy there. And I think delaying this to October is probably not a good idea. If your intentions are saying, hey, look, maybe halfway through the fiscal year, we are planning on bringing these people in, full time after you give the, a new chief, a month or two to get situated, then maybe we fund those positions at 50% for the next fiscal year. Okay, much to Doreen's part, let's not fund the full amount for next fiscal year, especially if we're not going to use that money from, from July 1st through, let's say, December, right? So maybe we fund it, at the 50% level and go from there. And the next fiscal year, once those positions are filled, then we fill those asks for those salary line items at the full amount of the salary liability for those new staff members. But I just want to remind the committee that the Fire Study Committee was very adamant about that, and that waiting for October town meeting to make that decision, I think is a huge tactical and strategic mistake for this town to make.
Peter, I want to just get you the data in terms of the requests for the past 10 years that I've been here for the fire department, both in terms of capital requests, what they've asked for and what they've turned back, just so you can see that there hasn't been reductions. There's certainly been not sufficient funding, but in terms of requests and turn back from spend, because it's such a variable in terms of the number of calls, because we pay per call, basically. It's just not fair to say that we've reduced their budget, because it has not been reduced.
But it's been admittedly underfunded.
Well, because we have no full-time staff, and now we're trying to build up to that. And if you pass the override on the 23rd, and I'm telling you that from an interviewing hiring perspective, I cannot guarantee you I'm going to be able to hire a chief and 2 captains before October. If I'm lucky, I'll get 1 before October. What's the harm in waiting until October? Because you'll have excess capacity. That's what we're creating if you pass the override. Excess capacity, you'll have available funds. That money's not going to go away. It might be.
Like the answer to that question is Peter's saying it's an urgent need, and so is the fire department study committee.
Without a doubt. But I'm telling you that physically, I'd be lying to you if I said I could hire those people before October.
So I think, Madam Chair, if I may, I think that goes to my point about just your strategy and waiting for October for the town to make that decision versus maybe saying, hey, look, we're really not going to have these people on full time until November, December, in addition to the chief being on board. So let me ask you this. So what happens if that plan fails in October? Then what the hell do we do? What do we tell the town? What if town meeting says no? We don't
Then
want
town
it.
meeting said no. That's their right to say no.
Right. So
it's their money.
I just don't see the logic in letting it wait, Tim. I'll be honest with you. I know this is your proposed plan. I don't agree with it.
Okay.
And I hope the rest of my committee would just, side with me on this one, that you had many members for a full year meet on a regular basis and was very adamant about it. That's all.
It feels like we don't advocate for anything. We were not advocating for the override. We're not advocating for these positions that we say are crucial. We're not advocating for the fire department study committee, even though we agree with them. But I don't know.
Well, I don't really believe that. I think we're moving forward with hiring a full-time chief, and the leadership position in the study and the committee's review of the study came to bear that those are the positions that were needed. So we are moving forward with one. Just like the study for the equipment, they tell us to don't buy 2 pieces of equipment in 1 year. You buy one, and there's a reason for that. It's about training on that particular piece of equipment, and don't go, equipment poor with a piece of equipment. You need to adjust. This is
but equipment's different than personnel, Tim. I mean, personnel has a trickle down effect to other personnel, who you're training, who you're hiring, who you're supervising. Equipment's equipment,
It is, but if you don't take care of it and you don't spend time with that person you hire, it's going to be a problem. I'm committed to hiring those folks. I'm just telling you that I don't think it's reasonable to think I can budget for it and hire those people before a next opportunity to budget in October.
Any other questions? Okay, you ready to move on? Meeting minutes. I don't believe we have any tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Wait, okay, we can adjourn this. We have to go to executive session, right? So instead.
Ma'am.
That was my understanding, that we were going to finish executive session at the end of this meeting.
Was it? I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
So we cannot adjourn. We have to enter into executive session.
Bear with me here for one moment. I need to get out my handy cheat sheet. Bear with me. All right. That's not it.
Are you looking for the law, Peter?
Yeah.
It's Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A13.
What was the last part? Section 21 what?
A13. 21A13.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I motion that the select board go into executive session under Mass General Law 30A, Section 21A 1-3 for the purposes of approving prior meeting minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to enter an executive session. Any discussion? By roll call?
Carlson, aye.
That's aye.
Thomas, aye. To discuss these matters in open session would compromise the position of the town. We will return only for the purpose of adjournment.